Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode, we welcome one of my favorite comic book artists of all time, the artist of one of my favorite comic book series of all time, Nailbiter. We welcome artist Mike Henderson to the program. Mike is a comic book illustrator, like I mentioned. He's the co-creator, cover artist, and artist for the series Nailbiter, as well as Nailbiter Returns over at Image Comics, along with his co-creator, Joshua Williamson. Henderson has also illustrated comics for Dead Man Logan, Daredevil, and Deadpool over at Marvel, as well as others over at DC Comics and IDW Publishing. Henderson recently released his co-created book along with Eric Trautmann and Greg Rucka, The Forged, over at Image Comics. The first volume was collected into a trade paperback that just released on September 13th, 2023. It's in bookstores everywhere. Nailbiter also released in a compendium volume 1 over at Image Comics at bookstores everywhere. So grab that as well. Mike came here to talk The Forged, Nailbiter, comics in general, and so much more. Please rate, review, subscribe, all those things over at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere you find your podcasts. But also follow all that stuff over on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky. This is Mike Henderson, comic book illustrator, co-creator of Nailbiter and The Forged at Image Comics. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, Mike. How are you?
Thanks so much. I'm doing well. How about you?
That's good. I'm good. Where in the area are you located? East, west, and where are you?
Recent temporary transplant to Florida.
Okay.
We just moved from Portland, Oregon. So yeah, we're spending some time down here with family.
So you're now on the East Coast, which is East Coast, Florida. Technically the East Coast.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're here to chat some comics. Obviously an illustrator here. Do you have a comic book origin story, how you got into reading comic books in the first place and how that transitioned into being an artist?
Oh man. Well, I was always drawing. That was, I was doing that as soon as I could pick up a pencil. My parents had an old collection of Superman strips. I remember that was sort of my first exposure. But I was big into baseball cards and stuff, as in grade school, and there was a little comic section in the baseball card store, that they used to have, and then wandered over to that section and Adam Warlock and Silver Surfer and stuff like that, and I was hooked.
Yeah, and now I mean, obviously you've done some stuff for Big Two comics, stuff like that, but right now you just released The Forge, first volume came out. And stuff. Do you have a preference between doing creator owned versus Big Two stuff, or is it just whatever is in the mood right now, right then?
I really enjoy sort of moving back and forth because there's different challenges to each. I think when you're working creator owned books, you deal with the entire team, and typically when you're a Marvel DC, just an artist, we're just sort of kind of in our own little world a lot of the time. We get our script and we collaborate with writer and colorist a little bit, but it's a little more creative, just a bit more involved. You're involved with every step of the process, which can be a little tiring sometimes. There's a lot more energy that goes into it, so I really enjoy just slipping back and forth.
I can see that. I mean, one of those things as a younger artist, you probably I want to get to that point where I'm writing drawing the Big Two comic books. But in the same sense, once you make it there, you're I kind of want to do something on my own to not just have to worry about a certain continuity or certain rules.
Yeah. And then there's the flip side of that is that you're always, you're thinking about the continuity and the rules of the universe rather than just making up your own things. And I had the same. I went to the Kubert School years and years ago, and everybody there is gunning to work with Big Two. But I came from DC early on, but obviously Nailbiter was my first big thing, and that was all creator owned, and that you just learned so much from doing that.
How did getting into Nailbiter, how did the connection with you and Joshua Williamson? I will say right now, Mike, Nailbiter is one of my favorite comic books of all time. So there's that aspect of it. So if you see me gushing over here a little bit, it's probably because I like that book so much. But how did that connection go? How did you and Josh hook up to make something like Nailbiter over Image?
We had done this little story of Masks and Mobs first. We had sort of connected through mutual friends. I think we were posting on, I'd posted some art on a forum or something and on Twitter, and we sort of met through that. And we did this Masks and Mobster story first, and then he approached me about Nailbiter, and yeah, I was all in.
That's awesome. We read for my book
Yeah.
club at my local comic book shop. I reread Nailbiter Volume 1 for the comic book club, and
Mhm.
there was this discussion back and forth on the artwork style in it, and one person was like they kind of wished it was more realistic looking, and I said to myself, I'm thinking to myself like I don't know, like Lee Bermejo, how realistic some of Lee's artwork can be, and was it
Mhm.
Mattia over at who just made the Cull comic book that came out? They're like super realism, or like Simon Sismon Krasinski has like the super realism to him. I'd almost feel like I'd puke while reading it if it was that realistic. That's why I feel like your artwork fits it so perfectly. It's like a mixture of everything.
It needed, yeah, Nailbiter needed, first of all, Nailbiter needs humor to
Yes.
work because it's just so really dark. Like none of it would, all the gore and the murder and everything, none of that sticks if there's not a joke,
Yes.
after each, brutality, if you will. Um, and, it's so hyper violent in some cases that if it's not stylistic, it would get pretty dreary.
Mhm.
I think pretty fast. I don't think anybody would have made it through 30 issues of that if we had done it. I certainly wouldn't have.
No, I can imagine like being like in the trenches, drawing and illustrating these people and these things. If you're the art style you used on that and your art style worked perfectly with it, in my opinion, because again, it softened the blow a little bit with both Joshua's writing and your illustration in there. It just worked
Mm-hmm.
perfectly, in my opinion, and that's one of those funny things that I was like, oh. I really love Nailbiter. I wanted to really love it, and they all loved it. It was great, but it was one person was like, "Oh, it needs to be more realistic." I'm like, I don't know, man.
That's
That's a
interesting.
little too
I've never
much.
heard anybody say that. That's funny. It's
That's why we
everybody's
were all
tastes are
like
different.
thrown back.
Yes. Okay. All right.
But yeah, so like I said, Nailbiter is just one of those things. I love horror that could be real, less supernatural, but like there's a mixture of having both in it and like having this thing. And I don't want to give too much away for those people who haven't read Nailbiter yet, but like which you should because it's been out for a little while. Perfect segue because you can buy it in the compendium right now.
Yeah, which is just out, perfect, just in time for Halloween.
Yes, exactly, right. But
I don't
there's
think I'm
this
breaking any news, but we will be back to finish it probably sometime in the next couple of years.
I think I saw a tweet out there a little while ago, and I got really excited because I sent my LCS owner and be like, "Make sure you get in on this when it comes
Yeah, yeah,
out."
grab it now.
But yeah, no, it's a book, and luckily for him as an LCS owner, he was very pumped that so many people liked it because then they can buy volume 2 and volume 3 and so on and
Yeah,
so
there's
forth. So it
plenty.
was yes, and so yeah, and then the compendium also has the hack slash crossover thing too, which is pretty
It
cool. So
does. The regular don't. The compendium has
yes,
that one in there. You're right.
yeah. But it's an excellent series, and that's I mean obviously a highlight to talk to you about Nailbiter because again I can't get enough Nailbiter in my brain. Yeah, I read it at least once a year now, and
I
I love this
appreciate
series.
that.
I mean obviously I love your artwork, but also Josh was writing and it's absolutely outstanding as well. So that does let's give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, of course.
But like so you just released The Forge. First volume just dropped in September. Or the trade for the first volume dropped in September. You had
Mm-hmm.
issue 6 or 5, I should say, come out in October. Issue 6 coming here in November. What's your elevator pitch for Forge? What we usually tell people what the book is about when you tell them?
So it's our sort of love letter to uh, Conan and heavy metal, and it's got. I mean, it's dripping off the page like our influences on this. We're not hiding anything here. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. This is our love letter to Conan and Edgar Rice Burroughs and Warhammer 40K and Gundam and all these things that we love. Starship Troopers, there's a lot of that in there. And it's essentially the core principle of it is there's a team of genetically engineered space marines, female space marines, who are bred to operate these mech suits, and they are essentially the emperor's and the empress's. Uh, so if there's a planet in the empire that needs subjugating, she sends these 5 nuclear weapons to go pacify an entire planet if necessary. And they have been intergalactic travel is possible because of passage through something called T space. And what they're realizing now is that they've been going through T space into somebody's backyard and dumping nuclear waste there, and these aliens are not happy about it.
That's an excellent way to describe it, because I wrote on our review on the website capesandtights.com that we were there for the story of the Forged, and it's wonderful. We're really there for your artwork, and I love how Greg Rucka retweeted that out, being like, yeah, that's us too, we're here for that too. But no, it almost has like a cinematic experience, and I think, like you mentioned, with the love letter to those things you mentioned earlier, I can understand where there's some of that in there, because there is such a connection that people sometimes don't know between comics and movies, in the sense that it's a visual medium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think part of the reason we got with a magazine format was to bring that scope to it, because we were all heavy metal fans, and a lot of the Humanoids does the oversized editions of their books as well, and when we were first talking about doing it, I just walked into the comic store. I'm like, nobody else is doing this. We want to do something nobody is doing. So that's where the magazine format came. And as soon as I was digging into the first, I'm like, I can't imagine this any other way, because the only way I have the scope and the room to do this, wide ranging thing we're shooting for.
I love how you said that, because we had Matt Kint on as well, and he was talking about how subgenre that just dropped recently over at Dark Horse also is in that magazine style format too, and it was the same thing. It was like talking about how it's different than what you see on the shelf, and nowadays, obviously, if everybody does it, then it becomes not different anymore. But
sure, we snuck
really
in there
cool
early, I think.
Yes, exactly. You get the first.
I know a lot of retailers do not preach because they have a hard time shelving it, but hopefully, its quality will bear out, and they'll see the value of stocking it.
For collectors and people who like to keep their stuff pristine too, my LCS had trouble getting magazine bags and boards for a little while there, and so that was a big thing where it was like, oh, what do I do with these now that they're like, I don't have any boards for them.
But
and so finally
I'm seeing that format long boxes pop up. They're on sale pretty much everywhere. It's just promising.
I mean, Distillery, all their new series are coming out in that pulp magazine style as well. So like Gone just dropped this past week as well. So again, I was like, you got to get these in here. If all these comics are coming in this size, you got to make sure you have them.
Yeah, I think you're going to see it more and more now.
I like it. I think it's it's better to be in that magazine style than I was just talking to my buddy Ben Bishop, who illustrates for the Last Ronin, and how they did like an obscure size in a sense to most people. Obviously, there was a reason behind it, but like, there was no bags and boards. Like, we're making like custom bags and boards for this comic book. Which I'm surprised IDW didn't come out there and be like, let's make our own. But that's a whole nother story there. But
it will.
Yeah, so hopefully someone will. I mean, I know Ben was making, as he sends them out in his monthly whatever, and he was making some and sending them out to people with the book. So that was nice to have those. But when you bought them off the shelf, there was no bags and boards for it. But so volume 1 of The Forge is now on the shelf, like I mentioned, in trade paperback format. 5 and 6 are hitting shelves. What are we expecting? Are we expecting more of the same? Not in a bad way, but more of the same from volume 1 and volume 2? Are we going to get crazy here? What's going on? What's the preview for volume 2 here?
So volume 2 is much more, it takes place almost entirely on the Imperial Throne world. And it's a lot of political intrigue and personal relationships in this one, kind of building out this world a little bit, and exploring these characters. I mean, the first arc, they were just in the shit, right? Like, everything was just going wrong. And, the planet was falling apart and shit loading around them. But this is a much more sort of human level arc. And I'm wrapping up. I'm into arc 3 already. Drawing arc 3 already, obviously, and then we're back out into the wild and crazy world of T-space.
So we talked Nailbiter and we talked the Forge here for a second. Is one's more of a horror, obviously sci-fi horror, and then sci-fi. Is there one that you prefer to do more? Is it just nice to have a difference in something like that, like to change your like genre a little bit there?
I love them both. I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy sci-fi as much as horror. But when Greg sort of pitched the idea to me over coffee one time, I was like, I wanted to do sci-fi next. I just wasn't sure what it was, and so you said that it's going to be that. I definitely have more horror in me, and not just Nailbiter, but some other ideas I'm going to go back and do at some point. Yeah, I like them equally, I think.
It's nice. And I think, like I said, there is a difference. It's weird because you've put the books next to each other. It's like you can tell that it comes from your hands in a sense, but there is this uniqueness to them, that like your horror comic book versus a book like The Forge that's a little bit different. And it is your big twos and your stuff like that is also slightly different as well. But there is that nice, if you read Nailbiter back to back with The Forge, that you would say, oh, they're the same artist, but they've definitely got a different style.
Yeah, much different. And The Forge is actually the first thing I've ever done digitally.
Okay.
Because I knew how many effects and craziness, all the craziness that was going to go into this. And my daughter had just been born. I'm like, I need more time, so I need to work faster. So I switched to digital for this, and really let me sort of stretch my legs a little bit and try some new things that I don't think I would have been able to do traditionally. But I think, yeah, like I still do all my big two stuff on paper, traditionally. It suits me a little better. Probably do any other horror books probably on paper, because it's a little less clean. I think it just fits the style of the genre a little bit. But yeah, the Forge needed to be a little cleaner,
I see
and digital let me do that.
A lot more people going like it was just like trend towards like only digital to now a lot more pen and paper, for multiple reasons. Obviously, you mentioned a little bit more grittier, a little dirtier, but also like you have this original piece of artwork. You're not gonna like sell your iPad or your tablet to someone and be like, oh, I drew the Forged on this book. But is there that in there too as an artist? Do you like having those original pieces of art?
I do. And like I said, I still do all my Marvel and DC stuff on paper, but there does come a time when you're like, I have 1,000 pages in my house. What am I going to do with them? Right. Like, and obviously we sell them. It's a nice little extra, income stream. But you just wind up having, I just had an enormous closet full of pages. I mean, Nailbiter is 1,100 pages long. Like, it's just enormous. But yeah, it is nice to just have everything on a tablet and just have it accessible at any time. It's pretty sweet.
And yeah, it's just kind of funny because I illustrate beer cans, beer can labels for a brewery,
Okay.
and having those digitally is also a lot easier to finish the project too. Like you finish it digitally, all that stuff you can just like give it to the printer instead of having to do an extra whole step to it as well. But I helped you clean out your closet before you moved, because I have the murder editions 2 and 3 I bought off of you on your website, because I saw the sale. You're like, oh, I need to help you move. I didn't do it for my own benefit, right? I didn't do it because I wanted those 2 editions. I did it to help you move. I was like, I want to help Mike out.
Less stuff for me to move. Yeah, I appreciate that.
It's awesome. And it's one of the coolest things I think I have on the shelf. And this is not just because you're on here. I mean, I have like the Snowpiercer collection and stuff like that. But like the way that the blood on the spine works and things
those are beautiful additions. John did such an amazing job with that. I think it's some of his best work. I love looking at those on the shelf. We can collect Nailbiter Returns as a 4th artwork at some point.
That would be
amazing. They're just not cheap to make.
Yeah, they're not cheap to buy.
No, they're not. And now they're all out of print. So
yeah, that's the big thing. It's like one of those things that I don't think I wish. Sometimes I see people online like selling things on eBay, and then someone's like, oh, I bought it off of eBay and I got this like deal on it, and they're like way over the price. I'm like, did you Google to see if the artists themselves are selling them? Because a lot of times you can buy them like at what a quote unquote face value on the artist's website, and they're likely signed and all these other stuff. And someone's paying $300 for volume 2.
Yeah, I would hunt down the artist first. You're doing everybody a favor.
Yes, it's just kind of funny. It's the same thing happened when was it Charles and Ryan created 8 Billion Genies, and like you could buy 8 Billion Genies #1 on eBay for like $100, but then you could go to Ryan's website and get it for $20 signed. And I was just like,
Yep.
what are people doing? Just Google this, find their website,
Yeah.
go to their artist directly. They make the money off of it, not some
Exactly.
guy on
Often with a
eBay.
sketch inside too. So
Yes. Which is awesome. But yeah,
uh,
so Nailbiter to me is, again, it's up there. We did a list for our horror week that comes out, and we did one of the best horror comic books of all time, in my opinion. That's Nailbiter. And then you follow, like I said, I'm a huge horror fan, but like I'm not a huge sci-fi fan. But like when I saw that you were part of this book, I was like, okay, I need to read this book. I can't, you know what I mean? And that's what's cool about it, because it gets someone that maybe I am now a sci-fi fan for a while, even books that you're not attached to, and jumping genres like that kind of helps someone, whether they're into Wolverine or into horror or whatever.
sure. Yeah.
A wide variety of things. If you like your artwork, it lets you read a bunch of different genres, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the hope when you bounce around from, create your own to big or horror to sci-fi, is that you take some people with you and, introduce them to new things that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise read. I hear it all the time. People, I don't like horror, but I picked up Nailbiter on a whim. It's like, that's about as horror as it gets, but I appreciate you giving it a try and sticking with it.
Well, like I think
we
I
were
have
very
number one. It's like, how would you just pick that up and be like, I guess I'll read this?
I know, right? That cover was, yeah, we got away with a lot on that cover. We weren't going to use that cover actually.
Yeah.
I drew that first, and now this is too much. So I did a secondary cover, and we're like, oh, we'll use this one, but we put that up on the jumbotron or whatever at
Yeah.
the expo, and people just loved it. So I'm like, oh, I guess we're keeping this.
Again, for those people who are diehard horror fans, this is something that, like, okay, this is amazing. Again, like you mentioned, you almost weren't able to use this. You don't see that on the shelf even today, where maybe people have a little bit less or less stringent about this kind of stuff. I mean, this is like, even in 2023, you don't see a cover like that out there right now.
Yeah, I don't know if it's we're in sort of a more squeamish phase or not.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see that much gore on a cover these days. Obviously, when we go back to Nailbiter, I'll try and break that trend if possible.
I think you're coming up. What, are you coming up on? 10 years is this May that Nailbiter one
It's
dropped.
May.
That's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
you're right.
Yeah,
Yep, it is wild. It is
that's
wild.
awesome. That's pretty crazy. And you went
Yeah.
25 issues of basically Nailbiter, and then Nailbiter Returns. Quick question while I want to jump in back, finish. We don't have to go too much longer here, but like, was there a discussion between you and Joshua calling it Returns instead of just calling it Nailbiter 26?
There was actually. I can't remember the argument. We were like, a number makes sense because we there was the hack slash. I guess that came about halfway through, but we hit Nailbiter 30, and then we just stopped there. And then, yeah, I think we did entertain the idea for a little bit. We thought, new number one would sort of spark people to go back and pick up the original, rather than saying, oh, there's 29, 30 issues of this already. I don't want to go back. Yeah.
That's, like I said, that's pretty cool. I just didn't know. I guess it's always one of those questions nowadays on what people do. If you do number 31 or you do 31, and what people will do, what people won't do. But I guess anybody who was a Nailbiter fan back, would take up Nailbiter Returns, whether it said Returns or said Nailbiter 31.
Yeah. Nailbiter Returns sort of flew under the radar. People didn't know it was out for at least a year, because it dropped right at the height of COVID when the shipping shut down, and so the book was delayed a little bit, and we really flew under the radar because it was in that last previews just before the shutdown.
Yeah.
And then we had the comeback and all that a few months later. But people did find it eventually and come back to it, which was nice.
Which is good. Which, I mean, obviously, like I said, if people didn't, obviously, a little bit more about the back end of that stuff. But obviously, if people didn't, you wouldn't be contemplating the idea of a Nailbiter Returns again. Like you wouldn't.
Sure.
You wouldn't. Yeah. Is that what it's gonna be called? Well, is that the return? Is it gonna be called Nailbiter Returns once more?
Returns again. No, we do have a title for it already, but again, for anybody who hasn't read Nailbiter Returns yet, it's if I say the title. So
yeah,
we'll give people time to catch up.
Yeah, It's one of those weird things that like I for our horror week too, I the guy from my LCS, Paul Eaton, we reviewed Killer Clowns from Outer Space, the movie, and it was
Mhm.
kind of funny. We're talking about it. I'm like, and if you haven't, like, first of all, you wouldn't listen to an episode of a podcast that you're reviewing a comic book if you haven't seen it yet. So that's kind of weird. But the second
Yeah.
thing, I'm like, the movie came out 35 years ago. I think you need, I think it's one of those things that there's no, but I still like one of those things,
Yeah.
comic books within the past 15 years or so. I feel like it just came out in compendium. It's kind of hard to spoil it for someone because you still can get into it and read it right now.
Yeah, comics is a little different animal. I
Mhm.
mean, if you haven't seen a 30-year-old movie, it's kind of on you, but I
Yeah.
mean, there's just a lot of comics and reading comics takes time.
Mhm.
So, I'm so far behind. I obviously, like I said, I have a 3-year-old, so I don't read much.
I have a 2-year-old and I'm not sleeping. My 2-year-old decided 2 weeks ago that he just didn't want to sleep. Like, it was perfect. He was the most perfect child sleeping. He'd go to bed at 7, wake up at 6. It's great. About 2 weeks ago, he just like stopped wanting to go into his room and sleep. We'd put him down, no
Yeah,
problem. And then he'd stand up 5 seconds later and walk out to the living room and be like, I don't want to go to bed. And I'm like, what the
yep,
hell? So now I haven't read anything in 2 weeks.
yeah. Mine did the same. That's typically a phase. So
Yes.
hopefully it's the same for you. That's this too will pass.
Yeah. And then we're pregnant with our second. And I was thinking to myself, like, why did I do this? No, I didn't get all the phases out of me before I decided to have another child. No.
No, you
But
might as well get all that sleeplessness out of the
it's
way now.
out of the way. Yeah. I'm practicing now for March when the baby's due, so we can, get
Yeah,
no sleep then, right? Just get myself
I hear it's
back in the
easier.
game. I'm back
Yeah.
at spring training. I'm just getting my arm ready for the game. No, so The Forge is great. It's a great sci-fi series, like I mentioned. The story is amazing, by Greg Rucka and Eric Trautmann. But like,
Really
I'm
is.
here for your artwork. I really am. There's certain people that I like to follow, and I really appreciate what you do in the comic book industry. And I think, like I said, Nailbiter is going to go down for a lot of people as a great horror series that is one of the greatest, I think, out there in horror comic books. So I'm glad you were part of that as well. I'm excited for that. All right, you said you're working on, obviously, Nailbiter returns, uh, and other stuff. You're obviously working on the more of the Forged. Are there?
Mhm.
Do you have other things on your radar that you are actually nothing that you can say, obviously, but like you are working on
Yeah.
more independent stuff?
Um, I am gonna probably write and draw some of my own. I think, like I said, I do like to move back and forth. I think when Ford is over, after issue 15, that I will probably go back and do something at Marvel or DC for a bit. And sort of work on my own things on the side. So yeah, I've got the next probably 3 or so years mapped out.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm like I
feeling
said,
feeling pretty good
excited.
about yeah.
I think it's an exciting world in both the independent comic book phase or genre like style and also the big two stuff. I think there's a bunch of cool stuff that are like percolating and going out there. So I'm excited to see where the comic book industry goes in the future. You were in Florida. You didn't end up at New York Comic Con, right?
I didn't. No.
Thank God, right?
Yeah. And apparently COVID was everywhere.
I was thinking
Everywhere.
about it. I had
Everybody
my own
got it.
convention. We had our convention in Bangor, Maine, where I live, and we had our own. That was the 13th to the 15th that same weekend. And after we were done, I'm like scrolling through Twitter and seeing this. I'm like, thank God I didn't have nothing to do and I could go to New York.
Yeah. I can't
But
imagine doing a con that big and not wearing a mask the entire
yes,
time.
that's
I would.
that's the
Whew,
other thing. Yeah, exactly. It was kind of
yeah.
funny. I did think I saw someone tweet out, I didn't get COVID. I must have not have been at all the cool parties. I was like, that's probably right. They probably didn't even get it on the
Yeah.
floor. It's probably the after parties, the dinners you went to and things.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it's ripe on the show floor. I know
yeah,
I did Rose City last
yeah,
month. I know a lot of folks on the floor got it. Not near as bad as New York City,
yeah.
obviously, but you know, behind my table, maybe I'll let the mask slip every once in a while, but if I'm getting up and walking around that floor, no way.
It's funny.
No way.
Con crud itself was just bad enough. Like I just like I've
Oh
seen
yeah.
there's a bunch of artists and creators that have just said, I'm just gonna wear it from now on at conventions. Like
Yep.
maybe I'll take it off here and there, but like I just don't
Yep.
like it used to be like you go to a convention, maybe you'd be out of work for the next week
Yeah.
because you got just sick in general. Forget COVID.
I
It was
got
just kind of
I think I
crazy.
got con crud like every, probably 3 out of every 5 shows.
Mhm.
2, 3 times out of every 5 shows, like this, pre-COVID and everything. And yeah,
Mhm.
it'll knock you out for 3 or 4 days afterwards at
Yep.
least. But
And
we don't
when
get
you're
sick
already
day. We
crunching
don't get sick
deadlines,
days. But yeah, we don't no sick days in this business. We just keep going.
Well, it's funny because you took time off of working itself to go to a convention, and then you have to take 3 days extra off on top of it because you don't want to do that. But it was someone tweeted out like the entire comic book industry is like on vacation for the next week because everybody had COVID. I was like, yeah, it sounds like about right now.
Well, COVID's no joke. I didn't have one of the early. I think we got Omicron. I think, which was compared to the other ones, not nearly as bad, and it still sucked.
Yeah, I got mine in August of 2022, August of last year in New York City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
New York. But it wasn't for a convention; it was just in New York City. We were just in New York City.
There.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I'm so, like I said, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on and chat comics and such on here. We're big fans of your work. Keep it up, keep it going. We're looking forward to more Forged as well as Nailbiter and anything else you're doing. So I really appreciate it. You can you have a website. Obviously I bought something on there.
It's a Big Cartel store. Yeah, which is Mike S. Henderson. Yep.
Okay. And then you have your artwork for sale too on a seller too, right?
comicarthouse.com.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that.
Yeah, you can contact Bob there. He's got all my stuff.
That's awesome. That's so great. So yeah, let's check it out. And then again, we're looking forward to more. We're so excited. Potentially, like I said, I've always been a Nailbiter fan. So when you tease that out, we were like, oh, we're working on some more. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. Hurry up.
Yep. There will be more. We're already kicking around the ideas for it and figuring out where it's gonna go.
Joshua's not too busy.
Oh, he is, but we do it anyway.
We'll find time, right?
We gotta keep doing it.
Exactly. So again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat with us here. I really appreciate it, Mike.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you.